I'm sure that among most of us here, it's taken as a given that social justice is important, that as humanists, this is what we're supposed to be all about. But we also have to understand that there's a lot of opposition to social justice nowadays. For example, you have conservatives in the United States in particular, but to a lesser degree in Canada and the United Kingdom, who talk about social justice warriors. That is, people who are standing up for social justice, women who are fighting for women's rights, black people who are fighting against police brutality and these types of things. And so they're complaining about social justice warriors. So they make social justice a bad word nowadays. And they have a lot of influence. If you go on the internet, you'll see them all over the place. And what's very disturbing is that many of them identify with humanists. They're atheists. They're people like Bill Maher, for example. And these people have a lot of influence. They have a lot of followers, and they're reaching a lot of males in particular. And in the United States, in recent years, we've had a serious problem with sexual harassment and sexual assault at humanist gatherings, at humanist conferences. And when women stand up and fight against this, then they're accused of being social justice warriors. What's happening to them is being downplayed or ignored. And you have a lot of people, a lot of white men in the movement in particular, who say that these people are just troublemakers. And so we have to understand that we do have this opposition to social justice, and some of it is coming from within our own ranks, within people who identify as atheists, humanists, and free thinkers. And if we have these problems in our own movement, and we're not going to stand up and take a stand, if we're not going to fight against these problems within our own movement, we're not going to be of any help to the greater society. So we have to look at our own problems. We have to look at what's happening within our own movement and take care of that. And if we don't do that, then who are we to look at religionists who do take a stand? We were talking earlier about Martin Luther King. And there was a lot of, there's great comparisons between Martin Luther King and Perry R. And in the United States, when we think of Martin Luther King, we think of this great religious leader, this great African-American religious leader who was fighting for social justice, who was fighting for civil rights. But what's not known is that Martin Luther King also identified closely with humanism. Though he wasn't a humanist, he identified very closely with it. In his book, Strength to Love, he talked about the importance of humanists in the civil rights movement. He said he was thankful that there were so many unchurched people, who today we would call nuns, people who don't belong to any type of religion, who were taking a very strong active role in the movement. And he said there were thousands of humanists involved in the civil rights movement. And he said that it's better that one be a committed humanist than an uncommitted Christian. So although he was a Christian, he was reaching out, and he was not one of those conservative type Christians who were going to be opposed to any type of unity between the religious and non-religious. He understood the importance of reaching out to human beings from all different walks of life. Martin Luther King also knew a lot about the origins of his religion. He knew that, for example, Christianity was influenced by the so-called pagan religions, such as the belief in Mithra. He knew that December 25th came from Mithra and that it wasn't original to Christianity. He talked about the sacred meal, just as the Last Supper was taken part in among Christians, supposedly among Jesus and the disciples. He talked about how Mithra was referred to as Lord, just as Jesus Christ was referred to as Lord. And he talked about Mithra as the mediator between man and God. And so he saw these pre-Christian religions, and he embraced the fact that Christianity was not an original religion, but that it was just one of a continuum. It was just something that was in a long line of important religions that came before it. He also talked about the importance of the future, and we mainly know him for his "I Have a Dream" speech. But what's not known so much about the I Have a Dream speech is that it was influenced by an African-American humanist, Langston Hughes, who wrote a poem called I Too Dream America. So there is Martin Luther King being influenced by African-American humanists. And he also was talking about breaking down all of these various Jim Crow, the barriers of Jim Crow we learned about earlier today. And when I was in Africa, I went to Nigeria. And we had the Nigerian humanist movement there. And then in Nigeria, they also have a caste system. And it was pointed out earlier by someone who was speaking up here that the caste system isn't just something that occurs in India. It occurs in other countries. And when I was in Nigeria, the Nigerian humanist movement was taking on the Osu caste system. And that was they had the same type of system that exists in India, only this one here occurred in a certain part of Nigeria. And so the Nigerian humanist movement decided to have a conference located in that very area. So I was fortunate enough to attend that conference. And we had a march. We had a protest march against the Osu caste system. We met with government officials. We issued a communique and held an entire conference there. And while I was there, I got a chance to discuss the similarities between the Osu caste system and the Jim Crow system as it existed in the United States. And I also learned that a lot of people in Nigeria, a lot of the humanists there, they're familiar with humanism in India. And they would very much be interested in connecting with humanists from India. So those of you who are involved in organized humanism, they would be interested in learning more about Periyar and connecting to see how humanists in Nigeria and India can work together. And so, these are the types of experiences that I've had. And social justice has always been very important to most humanists. It's good that the people who are opposing social justice within the humanist movement are in the minority, but it's not good that they are as influential as they are. So we have to contend against them, and we have to once again show that social justice is not a bad word, but it's something that all good people are supposed to be involved in and fighting for. Also, we learned earlier about quite a few people brought up the importance of women's rights. Tony Van Pelt spoke about it. We just had two great speakers speak about it. And it's true. It's true, as Errol Veramani pointed out, that it's very important that we talk about how women's rights not only empowers women, but women's rights are good for the entire society. Someone earlier, I think it was Philip. Philip was speaking about Better Without Religion, and he mentioned Steven Pinker. And Steven Pinker, yes, he has a lot of good ideas on why violence has decreased. He wrote a book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined. And he made a very good observation. He says that cultures that empower women tend to move away from the glorification of violence and are less likely to breed dangerous subcultures of rootless young men. And so if we have a society in which women are empowered, that makes the society less violent. And of course, if it makes it less violent, it also makes it more prosperous. And so it is in all of our best interest to fight for the rights of women, because not only do they benefit, the entire society benefits, it becomes less violent, and it does become more prosperous. And Martin Luther King, again, he was all about civil disobedience. But again, the whole notion on civil disobedience was popularized for the most part by Henry David Thoreau. He wrote that essay on civil disobedience. And Thoreau, he was an unchurched human being, what we would call today a nun. He was, most of his friends were also non-religious. And what made his his essay so special was that it was completely secular. It was the first time someone had come out with a statement on civil disobedience which was completely secular. There was no appeal to God, but the appeal was to one's conscience. So whatever affected your conscience is what was supposed to motivate you, not a belief in a supreme being or anything of that nature. So again, we have secular ideals influencing Martin Luther King. Earlier I mentioned that Martin Luther King talked about the importance of humanists in the movement. And some of those humanists included people like Lorraine Hansberry, Ella Cox, James Farmer, James Foreman, and A. Philip Randolph, who was the grandfather of the movement. And Randolph was the first one to come up with the whole idea of the March on Washington. He also had founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was the biggest union in the United States. So there's this entire history of humanism in which social justice has been a major part, and we need to keep that going. I also wanted to talk about the importance of working together and understanding that while we've in the past have had great religious people who were involved in our movements and great non-religious people as well, the bottom line is that if you look at Martin Luther King or any of the religious people involved in the movement, there's no evidence that there was any God involved in that movement. If you look at Martin Luther King, we saw no miracles of a religious nature occurring. He didn't walk on water or profess to be able to do so. He didn't feed the multitude with a few fish or a few loaves of bread. He didn't speak to a burning bush. None of these things happened. What he did was explained in terms that are clearly and strictly human. And it's important for us to understand that if we're going to make change, if we're going to bring about social justice, it has to be about human thought and human activism, first and foremost. It cannot be first and foremost about believing in a God who's going to come on our behalf and do what we need to do. And so having said that, I wanted to mention one point about someone mentioned earlier, Frederick Douglass. I think it was Representative Raskin. He talked about Frederick Douglass and how Frederick Douglass talked about the need to fight the powers that be, the need to make a demand, and that if you don't make a demand, nothing's going to change. And Frederick Douglass was an agnostic. Frederick Douglass ran away from slavery, and he said that he prayed in the past, but he never had any success until he prayed with his feet. He came to understand that merely praying is not going to get the job done. You have to be involved in action. And Frederick Douglass, like Martin Luther King, who came after him, was also a strict church-state separationist. He offered to debate a minister during his day on the importance of church-state separation and keeping prayers out of schools as far as teachers being able to lead the prayer. Similarly, when Martin Luther King in 1963 was asked about the Supreme Court decision outlawing teacher-led prayers in schools, he agreed with it. He said that there's no way that a teacher should be able to come up in front of the students and tell them that they have to pray a certain prayer or believe in a certain God. So all throughout our history, there has been great secular influences, and some of those secular influences have been swept under the rug, but it's up to us as humanists to rescue that history, to go forward with it, and to understand that if we don't do it, then no one's going to do it. And again, finally, to first and foremost say that we in the humanist movement have to look toward what's happening within our own movement. And if we're not going to make the changes within our own movement, then who are we to look at someone outside of the movement who is willing to stand up and take a chance and make a change for the greater good? Thank you.